we have Adam Draper. Adam is a founder and managing director of BoostVC. He's a two-time entrepreneur and fourth-generation VC. Deals with some of the wildest sci-fi tech concepts, exoskeletons, backpacks, rockets. He co-founded Boost after his success as an angel investor in companies like Coinbase, Amplitude, and PlanGrid. And he can also drink an entire bottle of Tabasco in 43 seconds. So a man of many talents. Also, just one other thing I wanted to throw in here is Adam is maybe the first institutional investor who's really been like carrying the torch for DeSci. He's put together like a DeSci focused podcast series, and I think has done a really good job of helping to draw some attention from other institutional players in the Web3 space. So Adam, it's great to have you. Excited for your talk here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Patrick. And that was a huge compliment on the DeSci torch bearing. One of the reasons I've gotten so excited about this space in general is that I keep telling people it smells a lot like early Bitcoin, and I'm sure that's been cited a few times. It's a lot of very, very passionate people who are all trying to solve incredibly difficult problems. And it's also time for a larger competitive science change over the span of time. So I'm really excited. So thank you for having me. Okay, so originally this was going to be called The Failure of VC in Science, which I do believe is a really interesting topic. But as I started to think about why I'm so excited about this space, I wanted to, and as an institutional investor and as an investor who's been in the sort of crypto and Bitcoin crypto space for about a decade now, I wanted to sort of give an overview of how I'm thinking about it, why I'm so excited about it, and why it is going to be a seismic change, and then how to participate. I was just sort of thinking if there are any institutional investors or any investors on here, it might be interesting to or talent on here who's just curious. And then listen to my podcast. I'm dropping the first episode, which is with DeSci Labs on Monday, I think, Tuesday. And I've recorded, I think, 6 episodes. It's going to be a 10 episode series on the BoostVC podcast that's all focused on just DeSci. So I'm really excited about this space holistically. It's going to be super fun to track over the next decade. And I think it's the best place that I could be spending my time. Okay, so a little bit about me. My name is Adam Draper. I'm the founder and managing director of BoostVC. We've invested in something like 350 startups. I've invested collectively across 400. Some of my earliest investments were things like Coinbase. And at one point, I mean, when I met Brian Armstrong, who was very excited about this space as well, obviously from his chat a couple of days ago, he said at some point the world's going to be on one financial infrastructure, and he said we're going to be the easiest way to buy a Bitcoin, and that was sort of my trip down the rabbit hole through the cryptocurrency rabbit hole, as we call it. I started to really think about why Bitcoin was such an innovation. And the thing that I stumbled across was that what we're losing is trust in institutions as a society. And so I started to really brainstorm about other institutional trusts that might be being lost. And I realized that there was this emerging industry of scientists who were rebelling against the system. And so that was incredibly exciting to find out, in the same capacity that Bitcoin was really a revolution, that it created a competitive space to bring financial products. It's not, I don't necessarily think of it as finance versus the crypto space. I think of it, them working hand in hand so that they both get better. I think we need institutions actually to grow industries. And I think the same thing's happening with academia and publishing. We needed a competitive space for this stuff to happen. So I'm not an official scientist, but excited about DeSci. And the one thing that has been consistent across my entire career is that I'm just obsessed with early stage breakthroughs and the communities that form around them. I a little bit about me. I love comic books. I have an enormous collection. My favorite comic book is a comic called Invincible, that it was created by a guy named Robert Kirkman. And I was raised on Monopoly. So I am going to bring up some of these things throughout the whole thing. Not Monopoly, actually. I just wanted to say it because Monopoly is awesome. I play any board game. I should just say board game. So why I'm here? I'm going to be investing very heavily in DeSci. We're in the process of sort of allocating our first couple checks right now. It reminds me a lot of early Bitcoin, and it's time that we have an alternative space to compete, to create a competitive space for science against classic academia and publishing. I know that tons of people have been talking about the misincentive structures of current academia and publishing for science. And really, I'm excited to have a role in this new community that's being built out. So a quick thing on BoostVC. Our mission is to accelerate the sci-fi future. We've been doing this for 10 years. We've invested in about 350 startups. And we believe that sci-fi tech startups of today will become the most iconic companies of tomorrow. And it's because they do. You can think of things like SpaceX is in battling the institution of Boeing. You can think of Tesla was a ridiculous idea. An electric car 19 years ago was a ridiculous idea. Martin Eberhard was actually the inventor of that, which I'm going to probably bring up later. And there's just basically, if you are experimenting on the tip of the spear in sci-fi or in technologies, those companies always end up changing how the world functions. And I was able to see this from the ground up with Bitcoin, the Bitcoin ecosystem. And that was a very special thing for me to be able to watch. So we finance rebellions against legacy institutions. Again, exactly why we're focused here. And the size check we write is $500,000. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're interested in potentially building something in DeSci or science or whatever it might be, we love taking on difficult challenges. We love mission-driven founders, and we love to support ecosystems. Also, just talk to our founders. Like I think generally, holistically, people enjoy our company. I'm seeking partnership and friendship. So one of the things, and so I wanted to title this Competitive Science, because I think that's really what this is about. Suddenly we're moving from a institutionally controlled scientific method, and we are evolving to a global talent pool community. And we have seen that transition happen with DeFi and how ownership on the internet has changed the world. That is what is taking place in Discord servers everywhere in the decentralization of science. And so it's institutions versus DeSci. Why DeSci? So something that I've been on these podcasts that I've been recording every single time, what I start with is, what is science? I think there's a really interesting thing, and I'm obviously not a scientist, but the one thing I remember from 7th grade science is that it was a process. And the really fascinating thing that I feel is really important for people to always remember is that it's the process and pursuit of knowledge. It's not a fact. It's not, it is the pursuit of truth. It is the process and pursuit of truth. And that is the thing that I've started most of these episodes of the podcast with, because everyone has a sort of more personal definition to themselves of what science is, but the one common theme is that it's a process. And I think that DeSci gives a space for a competitive process that is not controlled by any specific institution. And why does this matter? I mean, most of you are probably bought in already, or you're trying to learn more about this space. The question that I always ask with Bitcoin, people have their heels stuck in the ground when there's new technologies involved. I remember talking to my grandfather, who I love dearly and I still have breakfast with every 2 weeks. but I was going all in on Bitcoin, and we were the first fund to ever go all in on Bitcoin. And I said, I'm going all in on Bitcoin. He said, there is no possible way that this works. You need a government to create a currency. You need it. Like, people forget, it's only been a decade, but like the mind shift that's happened where you could have a currency online globally is crazy. Like, that mind shift changed a lot. And my grandfather was like, there's no way that this works. That's sort of what a lot of the people here are going to be met with. A lot of the people who are building in this space are going to be met with the challenge of why you're spending your time in DeSci. And the hard part's not when you get to argue about it. The hard part's when it gets dismissive, when people say, is that thing still a thing? Like, is there really still a competitive space for this? And that, in 2014, 2015, I would say that was when that happened. So the legacy financial institution, I think, is analogous to the scientific publishing institutions. And we are dealing with a very controlled system where the skewed incentives are for being published rather than creating breakthroughs. And I think at the base of that is very exciting thing. DeSci is controlled by everyone. I also think one of the coolest parts of it that I will get into and define a little further is that I believe it's going to flip the script on who gets compensated. And that's one of the most exciting parts of this as well, is that inventors, you could be an inventor and be one of the wealthiest people on the planet. That is a transition that is going to be happening. You can be an inventor, a scientist. You can be the person. Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit. So one of the things I wanted to really distill down on during this presentation was scientific advancement. One of the things that why it matters is that it advances history. I'm doing a quick history lesson of things that I thought were really, really interesting scientific pieces of progress over the last, 2,000 years, obviously. But in 1206, Genghis Khan was able to merge a bunch of nomadic tribes into the largest nation. Now, this might not sound like a scientific advancement, but the reason he was able to do this, one of the key reasons that, anytime you read about this, they will bring up, is that they had a lot of armor was very heavy and big. And the Mongolians, they would actually use very light armor. And then they would wear a silk shirt underneath that armor because the weapon of choice was shooting arrows at that time, one of the weapons of choice. And normally you might die of infection, you might die because the arrow goes through your body. And what silk does, the arrow would rarely penetrate the silk. So you're able to actually get it out of your body. Now, the thing about Genghis Khan, though, is that he got all the credit for this, but there's some person who realized that silk was basically impenetrable by arrows, and which dictated the terms of war. And so the value was actually accrued by Mongolia, but Genghis Khan in this capacity. Okay, now this is another trivia question. So just to keep you engaged in this process, this thought process around scientific innovation. In the late 1800s, someone invented the combustion engine. Do you know who that was? Because I didn't. It's a guy named Etienne Lenoir. And some of you probably were like, yeah, I'm a trivia master, and we're able to come up with Etienne Lenoir. But Etienne Lenoir didn't capture all the value. This was the true scientist who created the combustion engine. Without the combustion engine, no Henry Ford, no car companies, no John D. Rockefeller. Not to say I do see scientific progress sort of happening in tandem, and I'm sure someone else was working on a similar combustion engine, something to compete with the horse. But we don't remember him. But we do remember John D. Rockefeller, and we do remember Henry Ford, because they were good at the commercialization. They were good at bringing this to the masses. They were good at accruing the value. In 1973, this is bringing us closer to today, two people started the development of the TCP/IP. So they created the internet. The reason that we are able to communicate right now through the internet is because of these two people. And do you know who those people were? This is a hard thing to do with like no feedback loop right now. Here, wait 1 second. Oh, there's like a QA thing over here. QA. Oh, okay, good. There's questions being. Geez, I don't have a. Oh shoot. Sorry, 1 second. I can't find the. Okay, got it. Their name were Robert Kahn and Vint Cerf. I didn't know that either. But can you imagine, without the internet, we don't have Zoom, but we also don't have FANG. A bunch of multiple trillion-dollar companies were created based off of computer scientists who are financed by the government. And so also, if you think about all of these advancements, each of these, generally government financed. And most advancements in history were government financed. But the commercialization was privatized. I think that DeSci is a chance for us to like blend the two financial models. So without this innovation, no global connectivity, which no Bitcoin, no anything. These two guys, we should have a holiday in the United States for these two guys. But like I would say most people aren't celebrating Robert Kahn and Vint Cerf all that often. So I think we should celebrate them today. You should think about that at the dinner table today. Just be like, thank you for this. And when you're typing on the Discord servers, these two. Okay, but we do remember Carnegie, we remember Rockefeller, we remember Ford, Getty. I didn't remember Tsutsumi, but a real estate investor. Bill Gates, Carlos Slim, Bezos, and Musk. And we remember them because they were the commercializers. They were able to take a scientific advancement and they were able to find the application that actually saved humans time. Now, I don't know if what the value chain of what something should be valued at the very, very beginning and what the commercializers should be able to get. But I do believe that the people who create the breakthrough should be compensated in some form or another. Up until today, huge scientific discoveries, that has not been true. Sometimes the scientists are able to get on a board. Sometimes, they get tenure, they do all this stuff, but like, they're not Elon Musk. We don't celebrate them like Elon Musk. And so I think that over the next decade, that is the transition DeSci is fighting for. We're fighting for the wealthiest person on the planet to be a scientist. We overvalue commercialization and we undervalue the breakthrough. And so this is the current state of the world. The current state of the world is breakthrough at the top, and there's the dollar amount, and then there's this sort of commercialization process. And whoever figures out how to achieve mass market commercialization, they get the money. I believe that DeSci is changing the script on the protocol, just like there's this great, if you want to read something really interesting today, there's something called, I think it was Joel Monegro. He wrote a fat protocols thesis for crypto, where the value gets accrued on the protocol level rather than the application layer. I believe that this is that, but for atoms, where he's talking about bits. And so that, not atoms like my name, but atoms. So we're evening out the spectrum of where the value in the thread is, because we do have mass distribution now through the internet. We do have mass communication. A lot of the value should be about the breakthrough, and what's been throttling breakthroughs are academia and publishing. So creating an alternative space is probably the most important thing that we could do, to be able to create this global talent pool and tap into this global talent pool to create breakthroughs. The thing that drives me nuts is when breakthroughs are being stifled by regulation or other institutions. It's like nails on the chalkboard, like, hopefully that's helpful. Okay, one of the reasons that this matters to me also, I just wanted to bring up in a more lighthearted way, is, lighthearted, I don't know, is that I was promised superpowers. Science promised superpowers, right? Like, if you think about it, Iron Man being able to fly individually, Amazing Spider-Man got bit by a radioactive spider. And the X-Men, by the way, I know too much about the history of comic books, but basically when Stanley got bored of the everyone gets a superpower through radioactivity. Like if you list off a lot of the people who got superpowers, it was like, they're like a couple forms. There's gods, there's people who got like radioactively done, and then there's the people who are biologically born with a mutant gene. And like, so he created this new idea of biological mutant genes, which, CRISPR is probably going to be able to deliver to us someday. Without Marie Curie, we wouldn't have radioactive comic book superheroes. Marie Curie it was like 1903, where she had all these breakthroughs on radioactive elements. Okay, so ingenuity, radioactive genetics, like these are three different breakthroughs throughout history. People trivialize what comic books actually are, which they actually become mass market because they deliver a core character who's at the soul of a society at the time. Iron Man, Stan Lee actually created, this is a little off topic, but I think you might remember a little more of this presentation if I give you this. At the time, it was the Vietnam War. Everyone hated warmongers, so he created a character who was a defense contractor, billionaire. No one liked rich people or war, and so he created a defense contractor billionaire who was able to build things. And like it was the most popular comic for a very, very long time. I won't go into the history of all of these, but it's fun if you want to talk about that later. Yeah, and so without different pieces, without these different, like in 1969 and 1943 and 1953, we had huge scientific advancements. We had we got to space, we go to the moon. Marie Curie and Einstein with the Manhattan Project. So we go from radioactive elements to like Manhattan Project, which actually built a nuclear bomb. And thus we have all these radioactive like superhero characters. And then I used Watson-Crick modeling of the DNA as a big piece of this. So and that was a big piece of biology, which brought about X-Men. So I believe that over the next, so my belief is that over the next decade, 3 of the wealthiest people are going to be a scientist, a teacher, and an artist. And it is because of the collapse of institutional trust and building these alternative spaces that these careers get to target new financial incentive structures. And so I believe that and if you think about it, this transition's starting to happen. You could claim Bill Gates is a computer scientist. You could say Elon Musk is a scientist of some kind. But I actually believe that what's going to happen on this spectrum, where at the top there's a breakthrough and at the bottom there's commercialization, you're going to be able to make money at each point of it for the commercialization, rather than just making money when you're selling to humans, because there's a free market for all this stuff. It's going to be, it's a very, very exciting way to incentivize breakthroughs. And okay, again, hopefully you understand why I'm excited about this. How to participate? You want to meet with, the way to participate is join all the Discord servers. Talk to all the people who are really building these companies and projects inside of the ecosystem. Get hired by them. The other way there are projects you can buy tokens. You can invest in the companies. Or just start to like finance people to research this, like research some science. So I think that's a very exciting way to do it. And then the last thing is listen to my podcast. It's where I'm exploring with DSci Labs and Molecule and ResearchHub, and we explore why DSci, why is this going to change the world? Thank you for listening to my presentation. Here, I'll stop the share and I'll go to,
awesome.
And I'll answer some questions, I guess. I see a question, that's why I was going to ask. What are the main characteristics of an investable DSci startup project? So, Daniel, thank you for asking. So I always think it's the same amalgamation of a company or a project. You need people who are, and the success is determined by commitment. I have seen success be determined by commitment throughout my entire career. You either need a mission where people are committed to the mission, or a group of people who are committed to the partnership of people who they're with. And that's why crypto was so powerful, was most people were really talented and they were committed to each other and the mission. And so I think that these collectives of DAOs or companies or whatever you want to call it, all these things are just organisms in order to get the best people possible to solve the hardest problems, right? Like, who cares if it's a company? Who cares if it's a project? It's the way in which you're incentivizing people to grow and solve that problem. And so that's what at the core of BoostVC, what we've always thought is like, it doesn't matter as long as you're making progress, whether it's a company or a project. And sometimes you have to start as one and become the other, or become the other and start as one, you know, like you have to figure out what your path is for the right reasons. You don't just launch a token to launch a token. You don't just be like, you need to be on your own mission. I hope that helps. I think that it always starts with a few committed individuals who believe in their partner or the mission, ideally both. What are Boost's goals when investing in DeSci? How do you balance public goods with business models? Look, at the end of the day, I am like I'm a capitalist, okay? Like, and it's the worst ideology except for all the other ones, right? Like, capitalism is the best way to take care of your neighbor by creating mixed incentive systems, well-designed incentive structures. And so this question is really around how do you get around public good versus, and this is the core problem that I think is being solved by DeSci. I believe public goods become the way that you can invest in breakthroughs and you can actually have incentives alignment and make money off of it. And that's sort of the really, really exciting part of this movement to me, is that it's a global experimental talent pool trying to create breakthroughs outside of academia. And I believe that there's going to be some structure like the LLC or the C Corp in the United States that globally will be accepted as a tokenized DAO that will align incentives and grow value. It's still an experiment, and you have to think of it that way. You can't think of it as, you have to think, hey, I think this is the best way to raise money and align incentives for me to solve the problem I'm trying to solve. And so that continues to be true. Amazing specification about breakthroughs and regulations. Yeah, dude, yeah. I mean, I started, my first company I ever started was a company called Expert Financial. It was a secondary market for private securities. And after 4.5 years, we failed, but I learned a ton. And like, I learned about people, I learned how to make progress. I learned a ton of stuff that I was able to use to help other founders start. And in my head, I was like, I let my Series 7 and 63 expire, which are the regulatory like permits for you to actually like function as a broker. And I let them expire because I was like, I don't want to ever work in regulated markets again. First market I get into, crypto. so that's been fun. And then, do we need government to enforce the commercialization of science to pay back a percentage of their earnings breakthrough sciences? Look, how do I say this the best? This is a really interesting question, is what I'll start with. I believe that government is the other trusted institution that's losing trust at a fast rate right now. And I believe we have this, if you want to read a really, really great book, read The Network State by Balaji. And he's sort of talking about how geography doesn't matter anymore, right? Because we all relate to each other. We have the internet. We can communicate with each other. It's really about an exchange of goods and services. And I don't like the idea of government enforcing anything, is my answer. Because in a good capitalistic community, you figure out what the guardrails are based off of the market, and it's based off of buy and sell, and whether or not there's an actual need for the product. And I think that my issue with the government like enforcing it is more about like it would slow down the progress of the breakthroughs, which is my real goal, is just to create this competitive space that's really out in the globe, not inside of a specific jurisdiction. Like right now, there are people who take boats off of like hospital boats into international waters to get surgeries just because they're not allowed to in the US, and because it hasn't gone through FDA trials or whatever. Like these experiments are already happening and we're not letting them happen. So, but we're not allowing like innovation to take place even if people want it. So that's sort of like, I would love I see what the intent of the question is. My real goal is, I think NFTs enabled creators in a way that hadn't been possible before. NFTs are going to enable people in science the same way, where it's really about intellectual property and showing the beginning. All we got with crypto was like replacing trust with mathematical proof. And so you can prove you have one thing, right? And then you have a history of that one thing. And so that's what we're getting. We're going to have a huge history of all this different scientific IP, where you're able to track from the beginning. And so every person who contributed along the way will get compensated. And that's exciting. So yeah, in my mind, it's very similar to the crypto movement. But the thing that's different is you do work with atoms more in science than bits, where everything about, and there is, when you move from bits to atoms, there's always regulatory change that you have to deal with. And that's been really, really difficult for all NFT projects who are trying to own real estate, all NFT projects who are trying to own art, like in the real world. And so I think science is going to have to solve a couple of those problems. But good questions. Wow.
Cool. So I think that pretty much wraps up the questions. Thank you, Adam, for the presentation, for taking all those questions. Totally agree that if scientists can capture a little bit more of the value they create, we'll start to get a little bit more celebrity around these people who are like creating new knowledge, and maybe even encourage like new people to look into science as a potential career. So yeah, thanks again. It was great to have you.
It was awesome. Thanks for having me.